Welcome to Seeking On, where the seeking stops and you can just surrender, be here now. Welcome to Seeking On, Jake. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, brother. I'm really excited to have this chat with you.
Yeah, me too, man. So for those that don't know, Jake is a breathwork practitioner who I was first introduced to in early January this year. And, you know, I had learned a lot about this form of breathwork prior to this first session, but it has still blown my mind on how powerful it is. So I'm super excited to dive deep into all of that. Just to start off, how would you describe the breath movement?
My business, the breath movement?
Yeah.
I would describe it as life-changing, rewarding, growing, always evolving. Yeah. Uplifting.
And what is it that you do?
What I do is I basically support people to release trauma from their bodies, allow themselves to feel the wounds that have been underneath the surface in their subconscious minds that are plaguing them throughout their, or maybe not even plaguing them, but just maybe creating some personality traits that, you know, may not be serving them the best. So it's pretty deep work using the breath. And the breath, you know, we've been breathing our whole life, and you know, people think that we take it for granted a little bit. But now there's a lot of information coming out and a lot of psychonauts trying and breaking down these barriers of, you know, what the breath actually is and exploring what it is. And yeah, the power of it is, it's life-changing. It's freeing. It's evolution.
Yeah, I can second that. It's really been amazing. I remember in my first session, after having already sat with many, you know, powerful psychedelics and in large doses, I was still a little bit skeptical, you know, of breathwork. I'm like, is this really going to take me where I want to go? You know, is this really as transformational as I hear? But I remember getting out of that first session just feeling so light and so free, and just, yeah, it was as deep as any psychedelic session in a different way. You know, I wasn't hallucinating or anything like that, but, you know, that deep inner transformation feeling was like the same. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy because you can have the hallucinations and you can have that really deep transpersonal experience using breath if you choose to. But if you really want to be able to feel what's beneath and feel to heal, then you slow down a little bit. You still bring the breath in. You stay present with the breath. You stay present with what's happening in the body. And you end up bridging the gap between your subconscious and your conscious. You're bringing the subconscious, all the feelings that are underneath there, all the hurts. You're bringing them into your conscious awareness so that they can finally be felt. Not pushed down, but felt. Because once they are truly be able to be felt, then, and I mean felt consciously, then they can leave the body. And that's the beauty of it, and that's the power that you feel. It's like, yeah, and it is a tricky one to explain to people if they haven't experienced it before, because, you know, you're talking about breathing and having these incredible experiences, but it's the more you tend to talk about it and the deeper you go trying to explain it to people, sometimes the crazier you can sound.
Yeah, I can understand that. I talk a lot on this podcast about, that relationship between physical tension and mental tension, how they're kind of one and the same. And that my journey has been discovering the significance of the now, but then also realizing that it's not so easy to actually be there all the time. Like it's hard to remember. And that's when sort of this bottom-up approach to healing started, just really trying to clear the tension in my body that is preventing me from being who I want to be. Yeah. Which brings me to wanting to ask, how has it changed you? What's your story? How did you find breath work? I know probably several people that are watching or listening to this may have heard your story, but many haven't heard your story. So yeah.
We got a while?
We got all the time in the world, man.
I love sharing this story because I feel like my story is many people's story, and this story can spark up that little flame in people that tends to go out if they keep trying to heal themselves through Western medicine, using the mind, using medications, doing all these different modalities and not getting anywhere, and then getting to a point of no hope, and then that flame goes out, and that's when people start to think about suicide and start to think about leaving this world. And this is why I share my story, because I've been to that place and I know that it can just spark people up. I've seen it, and I've helped people come through that and come out the other end. So my story is basically, pretty standard upbringing. I had parents that were divorced early, but my mum raised us very well. And, I wouldn't consider there to be any huge traumatic type scenarios that happened to me. We went to private schools, I played sport, I didn't miss out on anything. But there were parts of me that I guess didn't know how to deal with stress. There was personality traits that I'd either accumulated or had passed on to me that weren't helping me to be my best person. So, for instance, I had very low self-esteem. I had low self-belief. I was very scared to talk in public. I would get quite anxious in certain situations, but I didn't know what anxiety was then. I just thought this is just who I am, because it's who I've always been. Just these little personality quirks. I would have girlfriends and then I would push them, when we get too close, I would push them away, start arguments. I was very much a huge commitment phobe, and I never had phone plans and pets that were actually mine or anything like this. I'd never liked to be held down, and always needed an out, basically. Always needed to be able to run away. And I read it's a beautiful book by Michael Brown, and he uses the word anxiety and he jumbles the letters around. And if you jumble the letters around in anxiety, you get any exit. And that's exactly what my life was like. I always needed an exit from everything. I was always half in, 1 foot in, 1 foot out for everything that I did. And as I got older, I met a beautiful young lady, and we were actually housemates, and that developed into a relationship. And usually when you get into a relationship, you have to start to commit to certain things.
Yeah.
And you have to, I remember even just us buying a bedroom suite together, and I had a panic attack almost. I was just super anxious, and it was very activating for me. That was a telltale sign of, my dysregulated nervous system, and over the years not being able to discharge my nervous system because I had no tools on knowing how to. And as our relationship developed, it started to get to the point where I was realizing that for this to go further, there's potential of I need to get engaged, or I need to get married, and I need to have children, which are, pretty big commitments. And, I also had things like fear of rejection and all these types of things. And one night I just started having panic attacks. We were actually going up to Exmouth, which is north of Perth, on a holiday, meeting a lot of Hannah's friends and that type of thing. And for some reason, my nervous system must have just got feared that, they're not going to like me, they're going to see me for who I am. And I just started having, and then that would make Hannah not like me because they were her friends. And I just started having panic attacks, full blown, to the point where I was just vomiting everywhere. It wasn't just a standard panic attack, I can't breathe. It was full convulsion stuff coming out of your mouth. And pretty crazy that I managed to get up to our holiday the next day. And as soon as I got out of the car, I started having panic attacks again and started vomiting. It was really full on. And I was doing that all night, just dry reaching, having full nervous system meltdown. And I ended up having to just fly home the next day. I just had to fly home. And the crazy thing was, I remember speaking to Hannah the next day when I was back in where we live, and all my anxiety was gone. I was like, oh no, everything's good. Cool, I'm looking forward to you coming home and yada, yada, yada. And because I didn't know any better, this is the first kind of symptoms that I had, so I just thought I must have been sick. And Hannah came home. As soon as she came home, I started vomiting again. So essentially, my nervous system was becoming allergic to my girlfriend. Every time she was around me, my nervous system would activate these sensations of you're not good enough, your rejection, all these bad things are going to happen. So it would create panic, it would create nervous system activation, and then I would have to leave the situation, which was Hannah. So I had to move out of my house to go and live with my mum while Hannah was living in my house. And I ended up having to be drip fed back onto her, weaned back onto her to feel safe again.
Because she was triggering your fear of commitment?
So many fears. Yeah. Fears of commitment, fears of rejection, fears of not being good enough, all these different types of emotions that were coming up in me. And to the point where when your nervous system is that dysregulated, everything is heightened. So there was probably another 20 different things that I could say that was causing it as well. But they were predominantly the main sort of factors. And what ended up happening is I ended up moving back into my house, and then still was having these really crazy dysregulation of my nervous system where I was so activated that I couldn't eat. I couldn't put food in my mouth to swallow. And now I know that when you are in fight and flight, your digestive system gets shut down because you're ready to run. So you're putting all your energy into your muscles and your limbs and your extremities. So I was just in constant fight and flight, and I couldn't eat. I didn't eat for over a week. And I wasn't a big guy then, and I'm still not a big guy now. And I lost so much weight being in fight and flight and not eating. And I got hospitalized just because I was convulsing one night and I couldn't stop. My whole body was just going into tremor, complete. I didn't know what was going on. Went to the hospital. They thought I was a drug addict, and they obviously did bloods and realized I wasn't. But it was just my nervous system was just in overdrive. And again, came back home. That was the first time I actually realized what Valium was, because at the hospital they injected me with it, And this was early in the morning, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. My mum was by my side, my partner was by my side, and I thought I was healed. They put Valium in me, and my nervous system just calmed right down. And I was like, yeah, perfect, I'm back. Yeah, let's go home. Everything's okay. And then obviously when that wears out or wears off, you're back in it again. And it just got to crazy things where, I'd traveled my whole life with my friends and traveled the world. I played sport to a level where I was getting paid to play. I, was working, all these types of things. Going out with my friends, partying, everything a 20 to 28-year-old would do. And now, I'm at my house and I can't even open my door because I'm petrified of leaving my house. It's just complete nervous system meltdown. And I remember watching a movie, The Life of Pi. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's, relatively, you could call it a child's movie, kid's movie. And I was having panic attacks just watching that. I had to watch what I was watching on the TV because it would just create me to go spiral down just on the smallest of things. And it was a really tough time. I was trying everything to get out of it. It's my personality. I was Googling everything. I was looking every supplement. What can I be deficient in? What sort of herbs can I use to fix my brain? Because I thought everything was in my head. I did homeopathics, naturopathics, juice fasts, water fasts, hypnosis. I had an exorcism from the people from the local church. 2 lovely women, that was an experience. 2 lovely women came over and were singing in tongues and all sorts of things.
But didn't do it, eh?
Didn't do it. But it was, I was clutching at straws, and I was like, I'm willing to try anything. I just want to get my life back. I don't want to feel like this anymore. And just that word itself, feel, I've got a whole different perspective on that now, our language that we use. And I ended up it basically got so bad. I went on medications for a little while, and they actually helped me get out of a really dark hole. But being such a deep feeler, they also put me on a sort of lane where I couldn't feel anything. I was very neutral, and that was never been me. That's never been me. So I was like, I know this isn't going to be a long-term solution, but it got me out of a really dark place, So I'm never one to say, hey, don't get off medications, don't do medications. No. I see them as a tool that you can use while you're doing the real work to integrate your nervous system. And it got to the point where one day I was watching TV, watching the news. If you're in a really heavy, got a very active nervous system, anxious, don't watch the news.
Yeah.
And it came on the news something like someone had killed someone on the news. I can't remember what it was exactly. And my head just went, you could kill someone. And it was like 2 people talking in my brain. And then it was like my soul was like, what was that? And then my head went, you could kill someone. And my soul was like, what are you talking about? And there was this conversation, there was this dialogue going on in my body. And it seemed like it was between my brain and my heart, or should I say, my fear and my heart. And because there was such a fight there, what ended up happening is I ended up having this brain loop all day, every day. It was like, you could kill someone, you could kill someone, you could kill someone. And that morphed into other things as well, but I was basically losing my mind. I'd go to sleep, I'd wake up, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And I was like, okay, I would never do it. I would have ended my own life before I did anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just this constant craziness going on in my head, and that was the tipping point for me. And it was like, okay, I need to end my life here. I can't do this anymore. This is too much. This is too hard. Thinking of ways of doing it, not to hurt my family, so they didn't have to fire me. All these types of things. And usually, when you get to that point of your darkest hour, there's usually a piece of light that comes in, and it was almost like the last call for help. And I spoke to someone, and they said, "Have you tried breathwork?" And this was 8 years ago. Breathwork is quite a big thing now. There's a lot of people getting into it, which is fantastic.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but back then it wasn't really a thing. We're talking eight years. About 8 years ago. So, I'm like, I don't know how breathwork didn't show up in any of my Google searches, to be honest. But I ended up trying to find some information on it and found some, and rang this guy. Went over east, and I was on so much Xanax to get there because I was so anxious. I was still fearful of leaving my house, and got to this retreat. Did my first breathwork session and thought I was healed. I just had... It was so powerful, and my energy and anxiety and panic attacks, and depression, everything just left. And I was like, oh my God, I'm healed. I'm back. And I remember being in the kitchen at the retreat, doing the dishes and just smiling and laughing and, kicking the footy, throwing the frisbee. I rang my partner. I was like, I'm healed, baby. Like, this is it. I am healed. And I've got another 5 breathwork sessions to go on this retreat, and I'm going to be like, tippy top when I come home. Don't you worry about that. And what ended up happening is I left that retreat probably the same, if not maybe a little bit worse than when I got there. But what I did is I came home and I held on to that first breathwork session. I was like, there's got to be something to this. That first session made me feel so good. I've done another 4 and I feel terrible. But there's got to be something for it to, even if I could just have a glimpse of that first session just for a couple of days, it would be amazing. So I just started breathing myself. I started doing breathwork sessions by myself at home, and within another 10 sessions, I was back at work. I still had anxiety. I didn't have any panic attacks anymore. I didn't have a panic attack after that first breathwork session I had. Never had one again.
Wow.
But I still had anxiety, and I was still having trouble eating, because I was just still so active. So after about, 15 sessions or so, I was back at work. I did another 20 sessions after that. I had an employee working for me, which is a pretty big commitment, probably pretty stressful. Why would you do that if you had anxiety issues and problems with dealing with, the outside world? I did another 20 sessions, and I think me and my partner at that time, we bought a block of land together, which is a pretty big commitment. Did another 20 sessions, and more things were happening. Another 20 sessions, and more things were, I was changing. My personality was changing. I was getting stronger, more courageous, more assertive, more soft, more loving, more gentle, more in my power. And I did another 20 sessions, and I think we got married. Married the love of my life. It was the same woman that went through all this stuff with me. Another 20 sessions, and I had a baby girl, which was my biggest fear in life, was to have a child. Because you can run away from all your other problems, but I was never going to run away from having a child. It was just never going to happen, because it was just ingrained in me. But I had a fear that I would. Even though I knew I wouldn't, I had a fear I would. It's a different thing.
Lots of irrational fears exist.
Yeah, there's a knowing, there's your soul knowing you won't. But then there's your nervous system, the old wounds that are controlling your mind. And my mind was making stories that I would. So, and we believe these stories, you know. So, yeah, since then I've done more and more and more breath work, and I'm a completely different person to the person I was before I even had my breakdown, to the person I've been growing into. Every time I do a breathwork session, I'm a different person. And, you know, I only know the person I am right now. I only know me as me right now. But I said that, you know, 30 sessions prior to where I am now. And I only knew that person then. But I look back at that person and I can see how I've evolved from that person.
Mm.
You know, and I can see how I've evolved from the person 30 sessions prior to that as well. So I know I'm sitting here right now being authentic and having this conversation with you with my perspective of who I am right now. Yeah. But I know 100% that if I do another, even just one, but if I do 30 sessions, I'll be looking back at this guy sitting here going, oh, wow, you're so different. You know, because that's what breathwork does. It integrates your nervous system, your trauma, your wounds, which is your personality and your ego. And when you heal those parts of you, your ego starts to dissolve. And what's your ego? It's your personality. You know, and what's left is just more love and presence.
Lots of love.
So much love. So much love. It's been a ride. It's been a journey. And, you know, I'm looking, I know everyone says it, but looking back at, you know, my journey, it was 100% the best thing that I could have ever had happen to me. It was, there's no way I would have a child. There's no way I would have an amazing relationship. There's no way I'd be doing half the things I'm doing today without this work. It's, you know, I remember sitting in my bed looking up when I was in all my anxiety, all my depression, looking up and just praying to God. I was like, whoever you are, whatever you are, can you please just help me, and I'll do my best to be a better person, to help people, to do whatever needs to happen. Just help me. And I still remember it because I meant it. And here I am. I followed the journey, followed the path, stuck around. Luckily, I'm pretty stubborn, and I decided to stick around and keep searching. And here I am helping other people release, you know, their own stuff so that they can truly be who they're designed to be, who they're meant to be. Yeah, it's dope. I love I love my life. It's, I'm so lucky.
Amazing, man. I feel that deeply. Thank you so much for sharing your story, because it has a lot of power, you know, like I think anyone listening to that can, especially anyone who's, you know, gone through depression, just knows how tough that would have been, how like you're just searching for anything, you know, complete desperation. And this work does it. It's the answer. It
is the answer. That's always been with us.
Yeah, it's in the air. And sure, there's other things, but there's something special about breathwork in that, you know, it's free. It's just the air, and you can do it anytime. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with a group. For people who this sort of breathwork goes by many different labels. So people who are listening now who may not be from this area, how do you recommend they find this? What are some key words?
So some of the key words that you'll be looking for are like biodynamic breathwork, rebirthing. There's lots of names, but it's basically, if you wanted to search more or inquire more, you'd look for the practitioner and contact them and say, is this for trauma release? Is this a trauma release type breathwork? And that's what you're after, or a cathartic release breathwork.
Right.
And yeah, that's what that's primarily the questions you would ask. Yeah, because there are, like you said, there are Wim Hof style stuff. There are breathwork for all, pranayama for all different types of things. But what we're talking about is the cathartic release, trauma release breathwork.
Mm-hmm. And one label that I've seen often used is conscious connected breath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason we use, well, what conscious connected breath is one, you're being conscious when you breathe. And the connected breath means when you breathe all the way in, as you reach full lung capacity, you don't pause, you just breathe all the way back out. So you're connecting your in-breath and your out-breath, almost like a circle.
Could you maybe just do a quick demonstration to the mic?
So you would be breathing through your mouth, and the reason we use our mouth is simply because it's a bigger hole, and it's a lot easier to fill your lungs up with a bigger hole than it is through your nose. Just effort, basically. So if you open your mouth, you'd breathe all the way in. So what you would have noticed is as soon as I breathed all the way in, I just started breathing all the way back out when I reached the top. And as I breathed all the way out to capacity, I breathed all the way back in again. So it's just like a circle.
It's so simple.
It's so simple. It's too simple.
Too simple.
You know, it's almost like, how do we not know this? how are we so close but yet so far?
Yeah, I can already anticipate many people listening right now are just thinking, what? Like, where's the magic part?
Exactly.
But like, that's literally all it is. Just, you know, you don't even have to go super deep or quick. It's just in and out.
Absolutely.
Without just eliminating those pauses and open mouth. Those are kind of the key. And just continuous, really.
Continuous.
So it's, you know, it's doing this for a long period of time that appears to...
Yeah. So the stuff we breathe, this stuff that surrounds us, this, you know, the thing we call oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, you know, we can't see it, but, you know, we can feel it when we wave our arm around. We can feel our arm brushing past it, but we can't see it, you know, but we're surrounded in it. But we don't know anything different because we're born into this place which is air, which is ether, whatever you want to call it. But it's, you know, if you think about it though, like, do fish know that they're in water when they're born in water? They don't. It's just all they know. But when fish are out of water, they know they're out of water because it's something different. Just like we know when we're in water, it's something different. We just don't realize what we're surrounded by because we've always been in it. But this stuff we are surrounded by is energy. You know, it touches everything. It fills every single hole. It surrounds everything. And when we go for a run or we exert the energy from our body, what's the first thing that we do when we get tired? We start to recharge our body back up with this energy. And when you're not exerting energy through physical activity and you are bringing more energy in through conscious connected breathing, so you're building energy in the body because you're not expelling it, that's when it starts to activate your fight and flight responses, your trauma, your wounds, all these different little parts of our nervous system that haven't been felt. And it activates them and it takes you on a little bit of a journey of feeling them again. And that can play out in a myriad of different ways. It can be physical, it can be spiritual, it can be emotional, it can be all different types of things that can happen in a session. And every session is completely different. So it's a matter of just bringing that breath in, and the more you start to build that energy in the body, so slowly, you dive deeper into your inner world and allow it to come back into your conscious mind so it can finally leave. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's almost like breath. You're saying yes to life again. You're saying, yes, I want to feel more. But in order for you to feel more, you have to release the stuff that is stopping you from feeling.
Yeah, the walls.
The walls, like if you've got abandonment issues, you can't fully be in a relationship 100% because you've got this thing inside of you that's protecting you, that's stopping you from really just putting 2 feet into a relationship and feeling all that love. You're only going to ever have 1 foot in because the other foot is thinking, oh, they're going to leave me, I'm not good enough, whatever it is. But if you bring that breath in and you start to heal that wound, then you don't have that abandonment issue anymore. So when you go into a relationship, you're like, oh, cool, I don't fear that they're going to leave me, or even if they do, I'm strong enough to handle it. So you're 2 feet in. You put 2 feet in your head and your arms and everything, so that you can feel love and you can experience more of what life has to offer.
Yeah, beautifully said. So what does an actual session look like then? What sorts of things could people expect to happen?
So a typical session, especially for people who haven't done it before, is done laying down. So it can be in a group setting or a private setting, one-on-one. And there's usually music as well that will be played during a session. It's quite emotive music. It usually takes you on a bit of a journey. If your facilitator is really good with the music, it's super powerful and it can just really make a session flow really well. It can be, yeah. And it's an art to read the group as well, and to know when the music you've put on isn't working and how to shift that as well. So it's typically done laying down, and as you start to connect your breath, you'll sort of end up in a bit of it just feels like a deep meditation. You're conscious the whole time. All right, so you're there, but you're going deep into your body. Mm-hmm. And usually around the 10-minute mark, there can be all sorts of things happening. You can start to feel like an energy building in the body, like a buzzing or a tingling. You may have muscles in your body that want to start to move. So you may have your arms slightly moving, or your neck, or your legs. You can have emotions coming up. You can have crying coming up. You can have frustration. Your body can be getting really hot and really cold, depending on what emotion is getting activated. So heat is usually anger, frustration. Cold, grief, sadness, fright. So you can go from really hot to really cold very fast as well. You can have sessions where answer you've been looking for months, days, years, just drops in, and you're like, aha, wow, okay, that was pretty cool. You can have grief that you've been carrying for so long, or guilt that you've been carrying from someone that's passed and you never got to say, see you later, I love you, or whatever it is. You can have mystical experiences where they come to you and they will say, there will be a healing that takes place with regards to that. And it can, it's just beautiful. Like the amount of things, I could go into this forever. The things that can happen and the things that can unfold are mind-blowing. Mind-blowing and heart-opening.
Wow. Yeah. And, this is only in the whole thing all up 2 hours kind of, or less.
Yeah, well, the breathwork session itself, it's usually only about 45 minutes of deep breathing.
Yeah, and that becomes very effortless too, right?
Yeah, that's what, usually when you tell people, how am I going to breathe like that for 45 minutes? But once you get through the first couple of minutes, it's almost like your body knows what it needs to do. It's like, oh, I remember this. And the breathing just becomes effortless. You just start to breathe deep. Sometimes you're breathing even deeper. You're just like, you're activating these parts of your nervous system. And they're like, I need more. I need more energy to unlock this part. And you just start to breathe really deep. And, that's where you need having the guidance of a trained facilitator to slow you back down and just keep breathing and feeling. Because the key part with healing trauma is feeling it. And there's a lot of breath work out there where you may have a facilitator that just wants to go bang, 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 let's breathe, and just, too much. You've let the breath overtake you, and you're not quite feeling what's going on. To really push through it, you need to feel it. You need to feel the emotion. You need to feel the body. You need to allow it to move and allow it to integrate. And once that's done in a session, which is typically around the 10-15 minute mark, you can come back to breath. So you'll breathe, you'll reach a peak and you'll have a release, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever. And then you let that come down, might be a cry, you cry for a little bit, and then you come back to breath. You breathe, and then you may have another release. And it may be the next layer of whatever you've just integrated. Yeah, that's a typical session. And at the end, after everyone's finished, you have about 10-15 minutes of just deep relaxation, and people can have all sorts of beautiful bliss states when they enter this place. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, totally. As you were speaking there, it was definitely bringing back some memories of many of my journeys, and often it's just this explosion of laughter on the releases, to just pure connection to source, to awe, like what this is all about. This existence we are here for is presented to you. Yeah. It's beautiful. You mentioned a little bit about how you like to bring in movement into the practice, and your business is even called the Breath Movement, which is done very intentionally. Can you talk a little bit about movement and how that helps this work?
Yeah, so as I've evolved, I remember when I first started breathwork, and they had a retreat, and everyone was dancing and moving, and I couldn't move. I was like an ironing board while everyone was dancing, and my head was just going, why don't you just dance? Because you look like more of an idiot standing by the side. No one cares, but my body was just stuck and I couldn't move. And as I started to do more work on myself and integration and started to learn more, I started realizing that the more we move in a breathwork session, the more we start to open up our muscles, and that it's actually our muscles and our fascia that stores a lot of our trauma, a lot of our holding patterns. That's why you can see certain people's structure, the way their posture is, the way their arms are, the way where they have muscular pain. It's usually because they're holding stress in those areas. So bringing movement with breath is absolutely amazing, because what it's doing is the breath is activating these dormant parts of you, these wounds. The muscles are trying to hold on to them. So if you start to move and you start to stretch and you start to release the muscles, then they start even fatiguing the muscles, contracting, tiring them out. Then they can't hold on to that trauma. They can't hold on to those wounds. They start to shake. And with the breath, then the muscles can release what needs to be released, and then you can feel it. Mm-hmm. And it just makes it a lot easier to move through a session with movement, allowing it to go through more layers in a session rather than just having one really big build-up of energy and this big cathartic release. You can go through multiple layers because with movement, you're dissipating the energy the whole time through your movement and your exercise.
It's just like another tool, basically.
It's another tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, what sort of movement we even talking about here?
So many different types. The main movement you want to do is conscious release or conscious movement, basically. So you want to let your body move how it wants to move. It's not there are ways of activating certain parts of your body. So, for instance, if you've got really tight shoulders, you can start to punch the air really hard and really tire out your shoulders to start to soften them while you're breathing and bringing conscious connected breathing in. And then that will start to release the tension and the wounds and the stress that is in your shoulders. There's so many other things that you could do with regards to that. I think we did one tonight where, we were releasing a lot of the holding patterns in our feet and our ankles, our lower legs. So there's so many different things you can do as long as you're stretching and moving and bringing the breath in. Mm-hmm. You're going to start to change your posture, change where you have aches and pains, all these types of things. It's even in our language. We really need to pay more close attention to our language. We say if someone annoys us, we call them a pain in the ass or a pain in the neck, these types of things, because when they trigger us, they're obviously triggering a wound inside of us. So there may be a muscle in our neck that tightens to contain that wound, because when your wound's triggered, if your muscles didn't contain it, you'll probably say something that you'll regret. You'll tell them you're a such and such. And then you probably won't be liked, you might lose your job, and all these types of things. So when that person triggers you, your muscles go lockdown. Don't say what you want to say, because you need to stick and be normal in society. You need to fit in, all these different types of things.
Yeah.
It's like how many people get stressed and get lower back pain when they're stressed? Like 70% of the population, most likely. It's because the energy builds up and the muscles start to tighten. Mm-hmm. So when you start to release the muscles with breath, then they start to be able to let go and your muscles start to soften over time.
Yeah, it's something that once you start feeling, it's just so obvious. But it's remarkable, I think, how much modern medicine ignores this fact. It's crazy.
It's so crazy. And a lot of the things that I speak of, I don't just speak because I've read it. I speak because I've done so much breath work that I've noticed. Yeah, I've noticed the changes in me. I grew up, since I was about 14, I had chronic shoulder pain where, being a tradesman, I've always used a drill every day, and to get my arm above my head, I would have to do this weird twisting of my shoulder to get my arm above my head, to drill, and then I'd have to reverse twist to come back down. I couldn't get my arms above my head in a straight linear line. It just wasn't possible. And I nearly had operations on both shoulders trying to get them fixed, and it was chronic. I had it for over 10 years. And breathwork released the tension that was in my shoulders. And the tension, what was happening is because my shoulders, my traps and through my shoulder blades were so tight that they were pulling my skeletal my skeletal bones out of alignment in my shoulder joint. So that's what was rubbing. My skeleton was rubbing in my shoulders, just constant friction, just constant inflammation.
Yeah.
And when I released, I've still got so much work to do, but I've released enough in my shoulders that my posture has gone back to normal. My skeletal system has gone into alignment. I don't have any shoulder pain anymore.
Yeah.
I can talk about other things as well,
It's crazy. And like you're talking a lot about just releasing that, felt physical tension, but it's really remarkable how many diseases even are caused from this type of tension, and that, things that we would never expect can be healed by air or cured by air they're literally, this is just inflammation and tension in the body that breath can heal some wild things.
Absolutely. I remember listening to a podcast with David Goggins. I'm sure a few people would know who he is. And he said he had such tight psoas muscle. His psoas muscle was so tight that it was affecting all his hormones in his body, because they were pulling on his kidneys, it was pulling on this, pulling on that, and all of his hormones went out of whack. Imagine what else is happening with all the tension in our body, pulling on different organs and stopping things from working properly. Once breathwork starts to release the tension in the body, the chronic tension that we all have it. We don't even know what it's like not to have it. We just assume this is how we are, but it's not. Once you release it, all the little intricacies, these little health problems that we have can start to disappear, have the potential to.
Mm-hmm.
This life, this energy that we have, if that can get into every nook and cranny of your body, it's healing.
Yeah.
It is life, it's survival. We all need it.
We definitely do. And we all need more of it. And that's all this is. It's just bringing more of it in.
Absolutely.
Is there any particular stories, kind of miracle cures or anything that comes to mind that you've heard from breathwork?
Just people that I've worked with, who are on the same boat as me,
mm-hmm.
where just in relationships that weren't working, really anxious people, couldn't socialize, all these types of things. Relationships breaking down is a huge one, and I just encourage them. All right, well, let's just do the work and let's see what happens. And once they do, 10, 20 sessions, they're completely different. And their relationship usually comes back, usually starts working, and I've got so many stories.
Yeah.
And I've got some cool things that have happened to me in breathwork sessions and, that I can't explain, that still sit with me. I've never written them down, but it's never going to leave my mind.
Well, I'm going to want to ask about that.
Okay. Sorry, that was a good segue, wasn't it?
Yeah, tell me about your craziest breathwork sessions. We talked a bit about this, but
so one of them was on that first retreat that I did, and I was obviously really anxious. Like I said, I was really worked up. I think it was probably my third breathe, and I was sitting in my bed. It was probably 2:00 in the morning. I could not sleep. I was so anxious. And I had never done any spiritual stuff before that. The closest spiritual stuff was probably that exorcism. But somewhere I'd read on, I don't know, Facebook maybe, just to ask the universe for an answer and just see what happens. So I just remember again sitting in my bed, just looking up and just thinking in my head, is this where I'm meant to be? Is this going to work? Is this going to heal me? And no word of a lie, at about 2 or 3, 4 seconds later, the guy that was in my room spoke aloud in his sleep, and he said, "Shut up, everything's going to be okay." I still can't explain it to this day.
Yeah.
And he did tell me before the retreat started that he speaks in his sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, cool. But I asked this question in my head. And he spoke straight away and said, "Shut up, everything's going to be okay."
Yeah.
And my anxiety just disappeared. And I went to sleep. It was just like, what was that? I'm on the path,
Yeah.
it was phenomenal. I told everyone the next day. They all thought I was crazy. But, that's just one story that I held on to.
Yeah, one of many. That's something interesting about once you're on this path. There's kind of, I don't like the word supernatural, but because I think everything's part of the natural, but the sort of ineffable, unexplainable by our scientific methods currently, those things happen all the time. It's like this collective spirit realm that is just dancing all the time, and that we sometimes get glimpses of it and see those dancing connections. And
absolutely, it's the magic. I call it magic.
Yeah.
But for some reason we've stepped away from the magic. We don't feel it as much anymore. We don't see it as much anymore. But the animals and the birds, and they're all still in it. Mm-hmm. But we just need to find our way back there.
Yeah, the mind has distracted us from that.
Yeah, our mind and our trauma and our nervous system, it's pulled us into our mind, as you say. And, I'm a firm believer that our nervous system our mind is a symptom of our nervous system. Now, the only reason I know that is because my mind was broken. I didn't do any work on my mind. I didn't do positive thinking. I did psychology, did see psychiatrists and stuff, but this was before I did breath work, which didn't help. But during my breathwork journey, I didn't do any of that. I didn't do anything with regards to trying to fix my mind. I just breathed, and my mind disappeared. It's still there, but I don't ruminate on things that I used to ruminate on. I don't think about, if I'm going to get rejected. All this self-talk that I had in my mind, it's not there. Our mind is a symptom of our nervous system. And when we start to release our nervous system and let it out, that's when the magic starts to come in. People talk about intuition. What is intuition? Intuition is a feeling. It's a feeling of truth that you know to be true within your body. Mm-hmm. How do you really cultivate intuition? You need to be able to feel more. You need to be able to feel everything. And how do you feel more? You need to integrate your nervous system. And when you do that, your intuition will skyrocket. You will have you basically become magic. You're entering back into the magic realm.
Yeah. The more time we spend in the now, just the more aligned we are with our soul's purpose, which is aligned with the magic realm, and synchronicities, everything just start happening.
Yeah. And you're present enough to witness them and see them as well. When we're in our mind a lot, it's all things happening, but we don't see it. But when we start to enter our body, we start to be present. Yeah, we see the little things, and we're like, oh, that was interesting. Oh, wow. Oh, you look at the dots and you're like, oh, those dots are starting to point me in this direction. That's maybe where I need to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful. One thing that I really respect from your work is this what we're talking about, intuition, but particularly your intuition while guiding breathwork journeys? Perhaps you could talk just a little bit about how you've cultivated that skill, and just your thoughts in general on how you find that line between giving too much help and allowing someone to have their own personal journey.
So the first thing I tell anyone who wants to be a breathwork facilitator is do lots of breathwork on yourself. You need to explore the work. You need to use yourself as a guide as to what is too much and what is not enough. And again, talking about intuition, I use a lot of intuition in my sessions, and I can feel into someone else's session and know whether, hey, they're doing really well. Like, I don't need to do anything here. They're holding themselves, they're moving, they're in their process, but they're conscious. So it's not, as a facilitator, it's not our job to be a part of that. This is why I love breathwork the most. It's one of the only tools where you're being asked to show up for yourself. You're the only one that can take you there. You're the only one that can breathe. And every other modality, we're going to someone to fix me. Can you fix me? Can you do this? Can you do that? Breathwork's like, no, you show up for you. And some people, when they're in their breathwork journeys, they don't need a facilitator to support anything. They just need to hold space. They just need to, the best thing you can do for someone's journey is let them feel safe. The safer they feel, the deeper they'll go. And other times there is need for support, and there is need for pushing someone to move particular parts of their body, to invite them. One of the biggest things with breathwork is inviting. You never tell someone in a breathwork session. You never say breathe. You need to breathe. No, but you can invite. You say, I invite you to see if some more breath wants to come in. And even using your words. I was petrified of using my words when I first started breathwork, because I still hadn't cultivated that part of myself. I still had, wounds in there about using my voice. But as I do more and more breathwork, I'm realizing the power of saying the right word at the right time. And one of those is letting someone know that, giving someone permission that they don't have to hold on to it anymore. Giving someone permission to cry, permission to feel it. It's so powerful. Because as kids, when we grow up, if we're angry or if we're sad, we're always getting told off. Maybe you're getting angry, they'll give you some food to shut it down. We're never given the permission to feel. And when you're in a session, that can sometimes come up for you, and you get to a point of resistance. And then just saying to someone, it's okay. You can feel that. You don't have to hold on to that anymore. I'm here. I've got you. That will just break down that little barrier of resistance and just let it come through. And it's, as a facilitator, you're not going to get everything right every time. If a facilitator thinks that they do, probably, I would say, don't work with them. It's not our job as a facilitator to be the guru, to be the God, to be the healer. We're just a supporter. You're doing the work. You're doing the healing. We just support you in that process.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to the power of that permission and inviting. Just saying, like, it's okay. There's some times where, one in particular I remember where I was just feeling just overwhelmed really with joy. Like, overwhelmed.
You do feel a lot of joy in your sessions.
Yeah. And, grinning to the point where it's hurting my face. And I think you could probably just tell, and you came over and you're just like, I think you probably put your hand on my heart and just said, it's okay. Like, let it out. And, then that just gave me that permission, just let it out. And it triggered, a massive laugh attack. And it's beautiful that how I think your facilitation, it's not just minimizing harm, it's actually allowing people to step even deeper in. I think that's where the skill of being a breathwork facilitator is really limitless. Like, you can always find new ways to allow and invite and guide people to go even deeper.
And every session's so different. Like, someone could have a really mild session, what you call mild, but they're all just as powerful as one another. And then the next session is just super deep and cathartic and powerful. And that's why you just need to take every session as a completely new session, and don't think that the person's going to have the exact same session, or that they're going to handle the second session the same as they handled the first. There's no right and wrong in a breathwork session. There's no perfect session. There's no wrong session. It's just you have to let everything go. Especially as a facilitator, because I remember when I first started, I remember preaching breathwork to all my friends. Oh, you got to try breathwork. It's amazing. It's going to change your life. Da, 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 da. And they're all just like, oh, Jake's absolutely crazy. Like, why is he talking about that stupid breath stuff again? He's losing his mind again. And, when you start doing the breathwork, facilitating, you still have this piece of you that's like, oh, I need to really give this person an experience. And I want them to come back. I want what I know to be validated from them. I want them to go out in the world and say, oh, Jake did this to me. And then as you start to do more of your own work and you start to release more and more of your ego and your personality and your wounds, you start to realize that it's all bullshit. I go into sessions now and I don't care if you have a good session, what you perceive as a good session, or you have a really huge, massive cathartic session. For me now, it's just like, I'm just going to be there for you and just let whatever happens, happen. And just feel into what I can do to support you the best. And if I know that I've done that, then everything else is okay.
Yeah, well said. It does make me think, though, when people do feel like they're getting stuck, perhaps they've had 6 sessions that are just feeling like they're not getting past something. What do you recommend for that in their own kind of inner exploration?
I would recommend a 7th session. I've actually seen that so many times in people where they'll have multiple sessions and they'll either fall asleep or nothing's really happening while people around them and other people around them are crying and having these big sessions and nothing's happening for them. What they perceive is nothing happening to them. Right? And then they just keep persisting. And then they will get to a session where it all happens. It's like you have so much armoring under that, over that first layer, that you're almost, it's like hitting a rock with a hammer. Bang, bang, bang. And then all of a sudden you'll do enough work where you hit the rock and it opens and you'll have this beautiful release. And then once that initial layer has been broken, most of your subsequent sessions will be quite beautiful. Do you think it's possible ever that they should change their technique on how they're hitting the rock? Rather than just keep going same, is there some flexibility for changing the way you breathe, the way you move, the rate, the depth? Definitely.
All of these things.
There are things you can do. It depends on the personality of the person. It depends on their ego, the protection mechanisms, all sorts of things. There's so many things you can do. Some people, like for instance, we talk about moving, but some people just can't move. As they charge their body, they just go into stiff and they can't move. And moving is exactly what they need, but they can't do it. So moving is always huge for me, but there's also, when you got to be really careful when people first start doing this work, that you don't overcharge them. You don't push them to places where they shouldn't go. That's why breathwork is so good, because it will only ever give you what you can handle. Even if you're just laying there and breathing. And then once they get through their initial protections and their nervous system starts to build up a bit of resilience, then we can start to tweak things and move things and bring things in that will, make their sessions a lot more, I guess, cathartic or whatever you perceive as a good release session. Yeah, right. But it's usually only when you first start. Even falling asleep is a huge one. People will breathe and start to yawn and then tired, and then they check out. Now, but you ask how many people get tired when they get stressed. You know, like if they've got to go to a dinner party and there's people that they don't want, and they start yawning and they start checking out. It's exactly the same.
You mentioned that you don't want to push someone in too deep too early, but then you also said that the breath doesn't give you more than they could handle. So what do you mean, like?
So when you're breathing and you're trying to make something happen. So what I mean is, let's say it took someone 6 sessions to really be able to feel what was underneath before they had a big release. Okay, so you're hitting the rock, hitting the rock, hitting the rock. Each one of those sessions, they were feeling and they were releasing. Okay, but let's say that big trauma there was sexual abuse, right? So they've got a lot of armoring around that. If you bring breath in and you start using words like bringing them into sexual abuse, or bringing them, you know, using body work in particular areas that are holding a lot of that trauma, that's going to be too intense for them. That's going to bring up too much too fast, because our skills can activate certain parts in them, you know, by using body work, pressure, words, music. All these different types of tools can take someone deeper. So you've got to be very mindful of how soon you take them there. But if you're just doing breath work without a facilitator, that's when I'm saying that the breath will only give you what you can handle. And that's why facilitators have to be mindful that how much you're pushing someone. You know, are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for them? Are you doing it for are you making sure they're safe, or are you wanting to validate what you're doing? You know, so that's what I mean by that.
Yeah, it's a bit of an art.
Yeah,
right?
Breath by itself will give you what you need. But when you bring in all these other little tools to make your experience bigger, it can be a little bit too much for people sometimes. And it's very rare. It's very rare. This is our natural gift. You know, this is our birthright to know how to heal ourselves. You know, what did Jesus say? He said, the kingdom of heaven lies within us.
Yeah.
100%. If you perceive heaven as, you know, what do people perceive heaven as? Freeing, love, peaceful, joyful, loving, all these types of things. And Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is inside you. You do enough breath work, you're going to feel peaceful, you're going to feel free, you're going to feel love, you're going to feel joy. It's all written there.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, I've found that my personal journey, lately it's felt like breathwork's like an art, you know, it's like a way of expressing oneself to oneself. And for me, that's kind of helped. When I reframed it like that, it's helped me, I find, get the most out of each session, you know, because it's like allows me to explore, you know, like you said before, the best thing to become a good facilitator is to just do lots of breath work yourself and just really explore and adventure. Does that idea of breathwork being like an art resonate at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an inner exploration.
Yeah.
You know, you go into every session, you don't know what's going to come up.
Yeah.
You know, that can be, you're entering the unknown. And
that's art.
Yeah, and as an art, you know, it absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how everyone's experience is so different too. You know, some people have full on, you know, hallucinations or like dream stories that they go into. It's like fascinating. Whereas mine, and I think yours as well, are just very much physical, embodied. Yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah, so many different things. You know, I just think some people have different attunements to different things, and you know where we're at is we just have a lot of physical release, but then you occasionally will get these profound sessions where, you know, I've had lots of them where you have visions, you have people come to you, you have all these amazing things happen to you, and they're absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I love it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it seems like that's another one of those things that you could fine tune them a little bit. For example, one of the breathwork sessions I had, I used to just be releasing a lot on these laugh attacks, but then there was one where I tried to do less movement and just more charging, and I had also first fully exhausted myself but prior to that. And because I was so exhausted, I didn't really have the same energy that I probably would have built up in me to release like I usually did. And so instead, I just sat with that energy, and then I just started feeling all these insights come in. So it was like once I switched away from the physical one, that's when the mental, the visions and stuff came in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we said, it's an exploration.
Yeah.
You know, I've done breath work in 40-degree spa baths with a snorkel and a nose plug. I've done it in water. I've done it in float tanks. Done it in nature.
On plant medicine.
Microdosing. Yes. Yeah. You know, like naked, exploring the parts of your body that, you know, can potentially people perceive as taboo in a breathwork session. That's where you start to learn about yourself. You know, that's when you start to learn about the work. You know, you can only take people as far as you're willing to go. I'm a firm believer in that. That's why I do so much of this work, and this is why I keep exploring further, you know, different other modalities that use breath and movement and these types of things. So it's an exploration for yourself. And what happens if I do this? What happens if I breathe and do this? What happens if I have a cup of tea and go and have a breathwork session? How's that going to affect it? And what if I meditate before I have a breathwork session? All these different...
If I go for a run or... Yeah.
All these different things, you know, it's what it's about.
Curiosity. Yeah. Beautiful. Just transition into the last thing I want to talk about is kind of the spreading of this work, you know, the trickle effect from doing your own personal work to, you know, how we spread this work without being too pushy, you know, all these things. Like, what have you learned in spreading the word?
So the biggest thing I learned, as I said to you before, I was preaching it hard, and it just pushed people away, and no one really wanted to try it. And I made the decision to stop talking about it and just do lots of it and actually be the change. And that's exactly what I did. And now I've had the absolute blessing to breathe so many of my family members, of my friends, you know, people from my soccer club, people that I went to school with. And they just started asking questions though. You know, they were like, "Oh wow, Jake, you've really changed. What have you been doing?" Well, let me tell you. You know, and that was the opening that I could then say, "Hey, come and do this." You know, and you know, as far as getting this work out there, you know, I honestly believe I'm a disciple for this work. You know, and I don't use that in a religious term. It's just my job is to get this work far and wide to places, to people who haven't ever heard of it. You know, me and my wife, we've got a camper trailer and a 4-wheel drive, and you know, we're gonna go on a big tour around Australia, just living. Not breathwork it's not for breathwork, but I know that's a huge part of it. I know it's me going to country towns, putting events on. It's me going to cities, putting events on, and just using breath to take us on a journey and get it out there. Because you know, I know that this work is going to change this planet. It is changing the planet. You know, we're in a big breathwork session right now. The whole planet. You know, all our fears and everything is starting to get felt. You know, we're all breathing together in this, and we're starting to feel all the underlying things that have been happening in the world. And we have to be able to see them, feel them, for us to be able to make a change. And we're in it at the moment. And we're going to reach this crescendo, and then all of a sudden everything's going to be released, and we're going to feel a lot better. And the only way to get inner peace in the world is inner peace in here. Peace in the outer world is peace in here. And every time you do a breathwork session, you make yourself a little less angry, you make yourself a little less sad, a little less frustrated, and the next time you talk to someone next to you, you're a little less angry at them, a little less frustrated, a little less sad, and it's affecting everyone. Who you change in here is going to affect how you relate to every single person. And your frequency, if we're talking about energy and vibration, when you have all these wounds inside, you're quite heavy, you're quite closed off. We're talking about energy moving through the body. When you don't have as many wounds inside, your energy is flowing easier. You become like a child in a sense where, at the moment as adults, when we get angry, we fester on it. And we have an argument with our partner, and we're like, "Oh, you did this 3 months ago. You remember you did this and this?" Because we hold on to this stuff. We get angry and we stay angry for like days. Whereas if you look at children, they get angry and then like that, they're happy. Mm-hmm. They just shift so fast. And one of the biggest things I've noticed on my journey is that's what I'm doing. I'll still get angry. I'll still get frustrated, but I'm over it so fast that I'm ready to move on to whatever's next.
Yeah, the half-life of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The half-life is so short. And that's how's my half-life going to be in another 200 breathwork sessions.
Yeah,
hoping there's going to be half of that half-life.
Yeah.
It's just going to be, maybe there won't be anger there. I don't know. I just don't know. But that's the exploration.
Yeah,
I'm never going to stop doing this work because it's just always getting better.
Yeah, it always is. I think that's a good place to end it. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too, bro.
It was an absolute pleasure. I just want to thank you for the work you do and the integrity you do it with. It means a lot, and it's inspiring me and many others. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, brother. Much appreciated.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Ciao.